Right now, you are sitting somewhere with an address, a street name, a number, maybe a postal code.
There is a stillness to the morning light, a gentle reminder to pause and simply breathe it all in.
So why did billions of people across thousands of years manage to build entire civilizations without ever needing one? They ran businesses, fought wars, and delivered messages across continents without needing a formal address system.
In medieval London, asking for a specific house would have seemed like an entirely wrong question to ask. They had no idea that the system they were using was about to be replaced by something different. This shift had nothing to do with helping people find their way. The answer starts in a world that looks nothing like ours today. Picture a village in Europe around the year 1200, with about 150 people living there. The baker knew the shoemaker, and the shoemaker knew the potter. The potter knew the priest, and everyone knew where everyone lived. If a stranger rode in, they would just point and give directions relative to a landmark. They might say, "The third door past the well, the one with red shutters." This was the entire system, and it worked perfectly for their needs.
In communities this small, formal addresses were unnecessary, because everyone was the address.
Your identity, your trade, your family name, the color of your door, these were the coordinates. Nobody needed a number, because nobody was anonymous in that close-knit world. The blacksmith's forge near the river, the Widden's cottage behind the old oak tree, the butcher 3 doors past the church. Every building was defined by its relationship to everything around it.
As villages grew into towns, and towns pushed toward becoming cities, this system evolved.
Shops began hanging painted signs outside their doors to mark their presence. Most people could not read, so these signs were images, not words. A carved golden key for a locksmith, a painted blue goat for a tavern, a wooden boot for a cobbler. These signs became the landmarks that entire neighborhoods oriented themselves around.
If someone told you their house was 3 doors along from the copper kettle, you could find it.
Medieval London was a dense, winding maze of short streets built without any central plan.
Residential buildings sat right next to commercial ones, with no zoning to separate them.
But that was actually an advantage, because these distinctive signs functioned as landmarks.
This worked across the ancient world too, as the Romans never used house numbers. They navigated their massive road network using something called itineraria. These were essentially written lists of towns along a route, with the distances between each stop. Think of it as a very long set of driving directions without the driving. No map, just a sequence from gate to Rome, 104 stops, 1,840 Roman miles. Silver cups engraved with these routes have been found by archaeologists. They are believed to be offerings from merchants who traveled the roads so often. Inside cities, Romans found locations the same way everyone else did for millennia. You followed landmarks. You relied on the fact that neighborhoods were often organized by trade. The street where the tanners worked, smelled like the tanners. The street where the bakers worked smelled like bread. Your nose was a navigation tool. I mean, think about that for a second. And this system, built entirely on human memory, trade signs, landmarks, and asking...
It carried civilizations from the founding of Jericho around 7,000 years before the Common Era.
Through the Roman Empire, the medieval period, and well into the age of European exploration. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains everything that came after.
The system started to crack once cities crossed a population threshold of roughly 30,000 people.
At that point, the same sign names started repeating in different neighborhoods. Multiple taverns called themselves the Red Lion. Several trades clustered in the same districts. The personal knowledge that made everything function began to degrade faster than it could be maintained.
The old method of third house, after the bakery, simply could not scale.
And when this problem finally forced a solution, the solution did not come from a city planner trying to help visitors. It came from a general trying to find soldiers. The same thing that built the modern address system would come back to haunt the people living inside it. But that is getting ahead of the story. The first known attempt to number houses happened in Paris, on a bridge called the Pont Notre-Dame, around 1463. 6 state houses sat on this bridge, and city officials numbered them.
Not to help anyone find anything, but to track which properties belong to the city.
It was a bookkeeping exercise.
And when a flood destroyed the bridge and its houses in 1499, the numbers went to the bottom of the Seine, along with them.
The experiment was not repeated for centuries.
Paris tried again in 1729 with a new numbering scheme. It also failed. In 1745, homeowners started hanging unique lanterns outside their doors as identifiers.
The city's famous street lanterns were also numbered, and Parisians began pinpointing locations using them.
But none of this was coordinated, mandatory, or worked consistently.
Meanwhile, in London, one of the first recorded streets to receive house numbers was Gott Street.
But there was no regulation behind it. The numbering ran consecutively, with number 1 next to number 2.
Rather than the odd and even system we know today, and because nothing was standardized, different numbering schemes existed on the same street.
Street names were equally chaotic. By 1853, London had 25 streets called Albert, 25 called Victoria.
Imagine trying to deliver a letter to King Street when there were 35 of them.
And this chaos is where the story pivots from navigation to something much bigger. Because the people who finally imposed order on this mess were not doing it for you. They were doing it for themselves.
What does this mean? It is completely empty.
Perhaps it is a message yet to be revealed.
She needed to conscript soldiers, quarter troops in civilian homes, and track populations across a vast, fragmented territory.
Her local officers relied on personal knowledge to figure out which buildings could house soldiers.
That knowledge was not standardized, not written down, and not transferable. When an officer was replaced, everything he knew vanished with him. Survey teams were dispatched across the Austrian territories. They walked through towns in an assigned sequence. And as they passed each building, they painted a number on the wall or doorframe.
These were not organized by street. They were assigned in the order the surveyor happened to walk past them.
The purpose was not to help citizens find each other. It was to help the state find its citizens.
In some villages, people understood this perfectly. Residents smeared the newly painted house numbers with dung.
People saw the numbers for what they were. Not a convenience, a leash.
But this was not just about Austria anymore. The idea was spreading.
On the 1st of March 1768, King Louis V of France had already decreed that all houses outside of Paris be assigned numbers.
Not for navigation, for tracking troops quartered in civilian homes. The housing of soldiers was the responsibility of towns and their inhabitants, and the military needed to know which doors to knock on.
This decision seemed small at the time. It was not.
Because when Napoleon came to power, he took the scattered, inconsistent numbering experiments of the previous century and turned them into a system.
His system distinguished between even numbers on the right side of a street and odd numbers on the left.
Streets running parallel to the river Seine were numbered from upstream to downstream.
Streets running perpendicular to the Seine were numbered starting from the riverbank and counting outward. The city of Paris implemented this between June and September of 1805.
The system was logical, elegant, and easy to follow.
It brought order to a city that had been navigational chaos for centuries.
And it is still the same system Paris uses today, more than 200 years later.
The French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars then carried this numbering system across large parts of Europe.
Like an administrative virus attached to a conquering army.
If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover stories like this every week.
By 1855, London was finally forced to act.
The Metropolitan Management Act gave the new Board of Works the power to regulate street names and house numbers for the first time.
The post office, drowning in undeliverable mail, pressured the board into action.
Before house numbers, the Postal Service relied on letter carriers who simply knew where everyone lived.
But as London exploded in population, that human knowledge could not keep pace.
Delivering mail by guesswork was becoming impossibly slow.
The board started working through a priority list of London's most confusing streets provided by the post office.
That same year, London was split into 10 postal districts, each receiving a code.
Eastern Central, Western Central, the very early beginnings of the postcode.
By 1871, 4,800 street names had been changed, and 100,000 houses had been renumbered.
And in that same period, the modern postal system as we recognize it clicked into place. Across the Atlantic, the story played out differently, but arrived at the same destination.
Philadelphia, the city William Penn designed on a numbered street grid back in 1682, became the birthplace of the American address system. When the first United States Census was conducted in 1790, Philadelphia became the first city to separate odd and even. But even that took decades to standardize. By 1850, the system was such a mess that houses with the same number sometimes stood hundreds of yards apart on the same street.
Fractional addresses like 1/2 and 1/4 were common.
One block on Callowhill Street reportedly numbered inward from both ends with the same digits.
A local newspaper complained that it was a serious undertaking to hunt any dwelling.
This collection, I assure you, will redefine the literary landscape of our generation. We must proceed with the utmost urgency.
To push the city toward mandatory enforcement.
After the Consolidation Act of 1854 extended Philadelphia's city limits, the municipal government finally took responsibility. Which matched property numbers to the nearest numbered cross street. That system became the model for cities across the United States, and eventually, much of the world. Everything was in place. People just did not know what everything was building toward.
Because here is the part most people never consider.
Not every country adopted this system.
If you want to see how another everyday system was invented for reasons you would never guess, click the video on screen now. I will see you there.